Welcome, it's the Matt Sager Podcast, Thursday, March 7th, 2019. And wow, can I just say thank you for all the well wishes I've gotten after being attacked last night? Actually, I was attacked the night before, and I described it on last night's podcast. And I then went on to say, it's a little bit screwy to me, strikes me a bit odd, that every time there's a female-fronted superhero film, in this case Captain Marvel, the amount of vitriol and hatred and the conspiracy theories and the walk-away campaigns are just nuts. Founded on nothing. All these negative reviews being left on websites like Rotten Tomatoes, which have since been forced to completely redo their systems because they were designed for a more trustworthy society than the one we have. So because I dared say, maybe watch a minute of Captain Marvel before you get all up in arms about it. And here's the actual quote that people are saying as proof that she's a racist against whites and it's ridiculous. So I honestly should have expected this, but I'm getting comments all over the place of, oh, well, that's why you were mugged, is because you're a beta soy boy. Which, whatever. We're grown adults. If this is where we're at, so be it. I certainly have a childlike spirit and a childlike sense of wonder. I'm not really ready, nor was I as an actual kid, to roll around in the dirt with other bully boys. I'm sorry. I've got a life to live. Good Lord. And speaking of true crime, just for a moment, Paul Manafort. You might think his sentencing would have been pretty substantial. It was ruled today that Manafort, who has been found guilty of 8 counts, 2 counts of bank fraud, 5 counts of tax fraud, and 1 count of failing to declare a foreign bank account. This being a very patriotic nation, a very patriotic judge in a patriotic district, you would think, wow, all right, this guy is literally stealing from the taxpayers to fund his activities in the Ukraine and with Russians. Let's see. Oh, just under 4 years he's been sentenced to. I kind of am losing faith. I hope something really miraculous happens tonight because so far the least awful thing in the last 48 hours to have happened to me. Well, this is an exaggeration, but compared to some of the exchanges I've witnessed and participated in online, the attempted mugging was nothing. And by the way, for what it's worth, the attempted mugging really was nothing in the sense that it's very rare that you don't get stabbed, shot at, or at the very least roughed up. So please don't take this as complaining. But I love that I got to tick off once or twice in your life, bad shit's going to happen. And I've deposited my little drop into the bank of karma. I've had my attempted mugging. And it was nothing. It was guys who didn't know what they were doing in a big crowded place. Wasn't harmed at all. So in that way, I would like to thank my attackers, although I do hope that the police have gotten to them because it does seem that they were on a rampage throughout New York City and they just happened to be on this very populated block, talking amongst themselves, figuring out what they were going to do next. They saw me coming, saw the jacket you may have heard me describe in great detail as being loaded up with basically like water and grease pencils and shit. Voiceover guy stuff, really. But I was wearing AirPods, which, as the police let me know, is catnip for criminals. So if for no other reason, they might have just been after that. But really, it went as well as a mugging could possibly go. If it were a Yelp review, I would give them 4 out of 5 stars for being very easy on me, letting me pass. And I kept all my stuff. I hope that they're shown the same mercy that Paul Manafort is shown. Because justice is a weird, fickle thing, isn't it? Now, fortunately, tonight, I've got much less inflammatory, I'd like to think, although we'll see how this plays out on Facebook, much less controversial movie news. Not so partisan, I don't think. It's an interesting bit of news, and it's a story of redemption, which is my favorite kind of story. So Suicide Squad began as a comic. Well, it actually first debuted in the pages of one of DC's anthology books. I don't think it was My Greatest Adventure, which is where the Doom Patrol debuted, but it was something like Strange Adventures or something like that. And at one time or another, they were Task Force X. Then at some point they coexisted. There was a Task Force X that existed alongside the Suicide Squad that would sometimes work with them. They'd get merged and unmerged periodically. Hardly the weirdest or least consistent thing over decades and decades of publishing and the sort of soft reboots that comics would continually go through so that the same superheroes who you'd meet in the 40s or the 60s could continue to exist at basically the same age, same social status, basically frozen in amber, be it 1941, 1963, or 1985. So the classification and naming and nomenclature of these groups, not at all an issue. However, in the mid to late 80s, a comic titled Suicide Squad and starring said squad was launched. It was written by John Ostrander, who was later joined by his partner Kim Yale, illustrated by, among others, Luke McDonnell, and it's one of my favorite comic book things ever. The place that run of Suicide Squad holds in my heart, I can't even tell you. It just hits all my sweet spots again and again and again. Such strong characterization at a time when that was still a very new element of comics. a team of anti-heroes long before the grim, dark, gritty 90s and decades before pop culture as a whole became all about the anti-hero in the form of The Sopranos, Breaking Bad, The Wire. We do love watching bad guys, but it took a while for people to get that about us. And going dark, as they say, was certainly not in vogue at the time of the launching of the Bronze Age Suicide Squad. And it still holds up, by the way. It is one of the best comics you'll ever read, start to finish. Just amazing. So I was hopeful, although kind of cynical by this time, when the announcement came out that Suicide Squad was going to be a DC film. For one thing, the comic itself had been through several relaunches. I believe at the time of the announcement, we were still in New 52 territory, where I know a lot of people enjoyed those books. I'm not going to call them quantitatively bad in any sense, but they definitely took many turns that I'm not going to paint with a broad brush and say they were alienating to longtime fans. I will say that many of the books were alienating to me. I found that many of them, and Suicide Squad in particular, I found that many of them, and in general, the sense that DC and later Marvel would end up taking, focused a lot on superficial qualities and on attracting new readers, potentially at the expense of alienating or boring longtime fans. That's not an accusation. It's a business strategy, and I wonder how much it worked for them. I mean, they're now back, in a way, to what they used to be, deep in this rebirth initiative, and I'm still a big fan. The worst of the New 52 was not that bad, in my opinion. The worst part of that time period was really the Green Lantern movie. But that said, between that movie, the Zack Snyder stuff that was yet to come, and a general sense that DC either didn't know what direction they wanted to go in, or that they did know and it was a different direction than I, as a fan, would enjoy, I did not have super high hopes for the Suicide Squad film. Ironically, for about a second, I was really excited for it when they dropped that amazing trailer. But, of course, that trailer was so good and so wildly different than the actual movie that the movie, one of the many problems with it that people say cursed it, made it a doomed process from the get-go, was that DC looked at the responses to that trailer and compared them to the responses to test screenings and said, oh shit, we got to be all about this trailer, which, as it turns out, is not really, it's a highlight reel, but the movie is just not this exciting or fast-paced. So let's rewrite and reshoot like 80% of the movie in the next 6 weeks. And whatever movie they had before that decision was made, I'm not at all sure that they had a great film and that this reshooting doomed it. But the bottom line is the finished product was not good. As someone who went to the movies as a longtime diehard fan of Suicide Squad, that makes me a fickle viewer in a way, right? I mean, because on the one hand, I've got a sort of brand loyalty, but on the other hand, I've got what they were not yet calling, a little bit maybe, I think we all have a smidge of this, which is maybe why the words shouldn't be used as often as they are, but I'm not going to say toxic, a perhaps entitled fandom that, all right, listen, I was there when Ostrander and Yale were rewriting comic history. We're propelling the art form forward with the best iteration of Suicide Squad and one of the best comics of the entire 1980s. So, okay, impress me with your 2-hour film. So it's fair to say that I was doing what many people who shit on Star Wars do. I was holding on to a little bit of, hey, this is some of the most seminal reading material of my life you're adapting here. Don't screw it up too badly. But that said, I don't know anyone, fans of Suicide Squad, people who'd never heard of them prior to the movie. I know basically no one who thought highly of that film. Many people loved isolated parts of it. I don't think anyone watches Margot Robbie in anything, especially as Harley Quinn, and isn't very impressed. I certainly was. It was a bad movie structurally. I mean, I went really out of my way to dissect and really understand why I was so turned off by it. And there were elements of the movie that were simply unsalvageable, would have required an entire new cut, new script, possibly a new director. Because this is an origin story about like 18 supervillains who you never heard of, including some to whom enormous amounts of attention are paid, others who, like, you literally get like 30 seconds of an introduction. And then you've got to solidify the team bond, which, granted, for Suicide Squad is supposed to be done kind of haphazardly, and they're supposed to be suspicious of one another, and you as a viewer or reader are supposed to doubt their loyalty, their motives. They're really fighting because if they don't, Amanda Waller is going to blow them up and they'll lose an arm, maybe more. But to have no team interaction at all of any substance is not good. But there was no room for it, just as there was no room for any story. And suffice it to say, if you didn't like Green Lantern, you probably aren't going to love Suicide Squad because the big bad villain is someone about whom you learn nothing and someone who resembles a cloud of smoke. Now, DC has since really taken great steps toward righting the ship, and I'm impressed. First of all, as I said, the comics are now equally pleasing to people who loved and disliked the New 52. This rebirth business, it's working out very well for them. Are there some bad books? Absolutely. But they're on a very even footing creatively. As far as creativity in this age of comics goes, I would say DC is between the big two, Marvel and DC. DC is the clear winner at the moment. Similarly, they're killing it on television. Yes, it is true and sad that this upcoming 8th season of Arrow is going to be both short and the final season of the show, but it's going to be, among other things, replaced with Batwoman. There are many rumors, some quite substantive, and I'm inclined to believe them, that Arrow will continue to exist. It won't be a weekly show, anything like that, but either by way of transferring over to another show as a frequent co-star or guest star on Supergirl or Legends of Tomorrow, or these yearly crisis events. Any one of those would be great and cool. And I frankly applaud any television show that goes out on a very, very high note before it even has the opportunity to start disappointing fans. So I say good for them. And by the way, Doom Patrol on DC Universe is amazing, and I can't wait to see what they come up with next. So now their cinematic universe is getting just as good, and they're doing it in the perfect way. You know, I feared that as Zack Snyder's work became more and more corrosive to the DC brand, I feared that they might feel that they had to, or that they would have to, not only remove Snyder as the creative architect of the DC Extended Universe, but because of the shadow that he cast over his movies with his introducing Henry Cavill as Superman and his clumsy introduction of Ben Affleck as Batman, that they were just going to have to do a hard reboot on all that stuff, and that while I would like to forget the time I spent watching Batman v Superman and Justice League, I wouldn't want them. I'd feel bad if they gave up all the gains that they had from that, all the advances they made in the form of, for one thing, obviously Wonder Woman, a huge success. Ray Fisher's Cyborg, I can't really vouch for it one way or another, but I know that his performances were generally more positive elements of what was overall an unpleasant experience of the Justice League movie. And I feel that Fisher should be given a chance to really play the character, out from under all this baggage, these multiple directors and reshoots. And above all, his performance was tainted by this awful CGI distracting from every scene he was in. So I would say keep him on the table, keep him available, and give him an actual chance. Because I think he's a very good actor. And as we now know, as part of this new semi-rebooted DC Extended Universe, Fisher is under contract for a solo Cyborg film that they predict will be in theaters sometime in 2020 or 2021. He's also listed in the not yet confirmed, or not fully confirmed that it's not canceled, I should say, Flashpoint movie, also on track for sometime 2020 or 2021, if it definitely gets made. It doesn't have the luck that the Cyborg solo film appears to have. But whatever the case, Fisher will go on, as will many other positive elements of the DC Extended Universe. They did not throw everything out. They kept the good, which is the perfect strategy for them. Because there was a lot of good. You had to sift through a lot of kind of garbage to get to it. There was some great stuff there. And in the case of Suicide Squad, the obvious example is Margot Robbie and her amazing performance of Harley Quinn. Yes, the cinematography was bad. Everything was too loud and colorful. And yes, she shared the screen with too many people with no backstory, and it was distracting. And Jared Leto's Joker. Nothing against method acting, but it did not save Mr. Leto. That was a terrible Joker. And that was a lot of what motivated Harley Quinn's character, and she shared screen time with him, and it was distracting. But the fact that Robbie was able to shine so brightly in such an ugly slog of a movie only speaks to how great of a job she did and why it's worth keeping the good, having invested all this time and money. Yes, get rid of Zack Snyder as director, absolutely, and look at different directions to go in other than dark colors on screen, dark tones in your screenplays. Like, don't just be the angrier Avengers. But I mean, imagine starting back from square one without all the amazing success of Wonder Woman, without the real potential shown in, for instance, Aquaman, which was really fun. So instead, what DC is doing is they're just carrying on as they should. So, for instance, The Batman. After dropping out first as writer, then producer, then director, and finally as actor, Ben Affleck is fully gone from that movie, meaning his time as Batman is over. He's never going to get back into that suit. As for Henry Cavill as Superman, I've heard people in positions of authority and in positions where they would know this sort of thing tell me that he's definitely still going to be in the movies. He's going to be Superman for the immediate future and years to come. And others in equally knowledgeable positions and with equal certainty have said, no, forget it. Cavill is never coming back. He doesn't want to come back. He's done. So I have no idea. But the fact that the DC Extended Universe, any of this stuff, any of their plans for the future won't be shackled to events of the past and even potential events of the future, like the odd bad movie here and there. The occasional actor who drops out, and that may push your release date back. they're still moving forward, and I really think that's the right thing to do. And where possible, it looks like they're going to try and, without exactly rebooting, try and repackage, recontextualize movies that didn't have a great first run. And there's no better example of this, and I'm very excited about the news I'm seeing today, of Suicide Squad sequel, which at one time was going to be called Suicide Squad 2. It is going to be directed by James Gunn, who Disney very foolishly let go as director for Guardians of the Galaxy 3, throwing that franchise and Marvel in general into all kinds of hot water and caving to a hard-right, white supremacist hate mob. Disney just really, they screwed the pooch on this one big time, but their loss is Warner Brothers' gain because Gunn's The Suicide Squad was always going to be, even with the shackles of the past. You know, the DC Extended Universe is for some time going to have a bit of an extra fight for success every time they come out with a new movie because there's going to be people who think of Batman v Superman when they think of DCEU. That's going to change over time. And I think there's no better chance to say, yes, we made mistakes, but we've dusted ourselves off and we're carrying on and moving forward. There's no better example of that, no better way for the DC Extended Universe to put their best foot forward and say, look, we've regained our footing, trust us, than everything I'm seeing and hearing about the Suicide Squad sequel, which is now, instead of Suicide Squad 2, simply, eloquently, and in a way that kind of summons imagery of a reboot without actually putting you through the slog of one. The film will be titled The Suicide Squad, as in this is the version. That other one didn't really happen. Some of the people will be back, but many won't be, and we'll forget about it and move on. And listen, I mentioned Disney before, and Guardians of the Galaxy. To that end, James Gunn was able to resuscitate the reputation of Howard the Duck on screen, okay? That is an accomplishment that, if you haven't seen the original Howard the Duck, and you probably haven't, there is no overstating what an accomplishment that was. If you can rehabilitate Howard the Duck, I believe you can do anything, and I have a ton of faith in James Gunn. He loves these properties, he loves making movies, and he brings a sense of joy to all of his works that I've seen. And he seems to really love the cast, crew, concept in the original comics of the Suicide Squad. So he's a perfect match, and the film now looks amazing. So what is this good news? What has me so excited, and what can we look forward to in the Suicide Squad? Well, for one thing, their shooting schedule is quite different. They're already in pre-production and making these decisions for a movie that's set for release in 2021. So it's not going to be the mad rush that Suicide Squad really was. Not excusing any of its script problems or editing problems, other than to say doing script doctoring and editing on an insane schedule of like 6 weeks was a bad idea. It's very possible that a lot of the problems could have been ironed out over, say, at least a year of pre-production and production. But that's not the headline that has me excited. Will Smith, whose Deadshot was fine. You know, Will Smith's great in everything. He's not amazing in everything. He doesn't bring gravitas to every single role, but he brings a universal likability. So his Deadshot was one of the highlights of Suicide Squad, but it didn't live up to the character, who is a very complicated and interesting character. It was a sort of, hey, Will, be Will kind of casting. And he fulfilled it. He did his job, but he has since had to drop out. He dropped out last week. And while that's not on its face good news, Will Smith has a ton of charisma and could have certainly rehabilitated the character in the role. But he's been replaced, this per Variety, The Hollywood Reporter, lots of other reputable sources. He's being replaced by Idris Elba. Okay, mic drop. That's huge. Elba, by the way, is also going to be the host of Saturday Night Live this week, so I'll be watching, see if he makes mention of it in the monologue or if any of the skits happen to mention his new career as a member of the DC Extended Universe. But I could watch Idris Elba just watching paint dry. He is such a captivating performer. So good, and so good at being a badass. He is a great choice for any role, but I think he's going to really shine as Deadshot. That is excellent casting. And that, combined with Gunn being brought aboard as director, is a sign that A, Suicide Squad's going to be great, and B, the DC Extended Universe is going to plow forward, acknowledging that mistakes have been made and not referring back to them, but not tossing them in the trash either, taking the good and building from it, and honestly, that is the way to go. Being a perfectionist, even when, yes, I'm talking about like 5 or 6 garbage fire movies, you need to rise above. Rise above. It is much better than saying, oh God, we made a mistake. We got to pretend this never happened and start from scratch. That is never a good idea. It would have meant no Aquaman movie. It would have vastly slowed down their release schedule and set back stuff like the excellent-looking Shazam and Joker movies. Now, a piece of news that has not been confirmed, but has been reported by, among others, film critic Grace Randolph, who I tend to put a lot of stock in the things she's got to say. You know, as a critic, it's one thing. You can agree and disagree, but not only do I tend to agree with her, she is very plugged in and knowledgeable about these things, and she says that part of DC's plan moving forward with the DCEU is for Harley Quinn. That's the other piece of good news. Robbie's going to be back as Harley Quinn, and part of the reason why is that DC wants Harley Quinn in a movie every year for the immediate future. So how that'll play out going forward, well, she's going to be in Birds of Prey, the full title of which is Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn. That comes out in February of 2020. She may or may not make an appearance in the standalone Joaquin Phoenix Joker movie and or Shazam. It would have to be one of those if we're going to see her as Harley Quinn in 2019. But it's definitely the case that in 2020 and in 2021, when the Suicide Squad is released, we're going to be seeing some Harley. So maybe that's when their plan of every year a Harley movie begins. Another thing Grace said that I agree with is that you want to be very careful about oversaturation and overexposure of characters, even and perhaps especially your best ones. Because you don't want to take a character that's proven to be a consistent audience favorite. Robbie is Quinn, who, as I said, she couldn't redeem Suicide Squad. Nothing could. But the film came to life every time she was on screen. And so as tempting as it would be to say, wow, we've got to just put her in everything, she can take the worst movie we've ever made, Suicide Squad, and make it really enjoyable during the time she's on screen, which is true. But that's why you don't want to risk anybody getting sick of her. You don't want to risk her burning out. And you don't want to risk, granted, Harley Quinn's crazy, so there's lots of fun you can have with that. But there has to be a little bit of an underlying backstory and stuff that makes her a unique character. If you throw too much of that away, even with the fact that she's crazy, which again gives you lots of leeway to play with the character, say maybe she wasn't really in this movie. Maybe it was a fantasy scene that she was experiencing, or maybe a nightmare that the hero experienced. The point is you don't want audiences to ever go, oh, there's Margot Robbie again. I don't think that's likely to happen. I'm just saying any hard and fast rule of a character that's got to be on screen in one of your movies every year, I would advise caution, although I have to admit, I'm very excited for all these movies, and especially I'm excited to see more of Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn. So, I don't know, I may have just argued myself into a corner. Regardless, I'm very happy about this. So as far as the release schedule for the DC Extended Universe, their next bunch of movies, there's lots of stuff that is likely happening, many projects that are rumored to be canceled, including the Jared Leto standalone Joker movie and a bunch of others. But here are the films that are confirmed and have confirmed release dates. Shazam, April 5th, 2019, which looks great. Joker with Joaquin Phoenix, October 4th, 2019. That movie I'm very excited for, but it has so many unknowns. From Scorsese, which, look, generally speaking, attaching him to a movie is a brand of extremely high quality. But he is an unknown figure as far as comic movies go, as is Joaquin Phoenix. Now, everything I see and hear about this movie makes it look amazing, but we've had that with movies before. So I don't trust anything is going to be great until I see it. Idris Elba, Luther, season 5, so good, as is all of Luther, as is most everything Idris Elba so much as touches. But he was in The Dark Tower, too, a movie that I was excited for even before he was attached to it, and a movie that was not so good. So again, this is all reason to be excited, but a healthy dose of skepticism, just so one doesn't get one's heart broken, is always helpful. So the rest of these DCEU movies that are scheduled, Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn, that comes out February 7th, 2020, a Valentine's Day film. Wonder Woman, 1984, June 5th, 2020. The Batman, and I look forward to finding out who's going to be donning that cape, by the way. The rumors are all over the place. I keep hearing Armie Hammer, but I've been hearing about Armie Hammer as Batman since like 2002. So, fool me once. You know what I'm saying? Fool me 9 times, I'll wait until it's official. But that comes out June 25th of 2021. The Suicide Squad, August 6th, 2021. And Aquaman 2, December 16th, 2022. Now, see, that's a great release schedule for a character. To have basically 4 full years between Aquaman and Aquaman 2. And while it's very likely that the character will pop up in the odd movie here and there for a few minutes, that's really smart, especially with a character like Aquaman, who, while very appealing and very fun, so far has a sort of limited range of tricks. I don't mean his powers, which, obviously that's the running joke. He's powerful, he talks to fish. I mean that the things that are charming about him so far, about Aquaman as he's written and as Jason Momoa portrays him, is that he gets excited and fights and rumbles and acts kind of like a frat boy. And that needs to be meted out in bite-sized portions so it doesn't get old. Especially as the universe continues to expand, people want to see more features and elements and characteristics of these characters. And as Momoa himself, being an adult and a human, he's not always going to have that frat boy energy, nor would we expect him to. It's weird when you see 55, 60-year-old guys running around singing karaoke with their shirts off. It's not a good look. So there are a ton of movies that don't have release dates but are definitely coming out between now and December 16th of 2022 when Aquaman 2 drops. But they're not confirmed. They may be pushed back. A lot of the directors and writers and cast members have signed on, sort of with the intent to make it happen. But absent a schedule and absent a complete production lineup, things could fluctuate. So we'll probably see that Flashpoint movie I talked about earlier. We'll probably see a Deathstroke movie at some point. And of course, Green Lantern Corps and many others. But so far, all we have confirmed and all we have confirmed dates of are the 7 movies I've mentioned, which is more than enough for me. I am plenty excited. I'm glad that the Suicide Squad's going to get a do-over. They deserve it. And I'm very glad that James Gunn is going to be the one to do it. Because first of all, he brings quality. He just does. He takes so much joy and pleasure from what he does, and it always shows in the movies. And he, too, like the Suicide Squad, deserves much better than he's gotten in recent years. Marvel really erred in letting this white supremacist hate monger pressure them into getting rid of Gunn. But their loss is DC's and our gain. Thanks as always. I'll talk to you tomorrow. And in the meantime, get in touch with the Matt Sager podcast. You can email matt@mattsager.com or call me. Number is 646-535-4788. Also, look in the links to tonight's podcast episode, where you can check out my Patreon, patreon.com/Matt Sager, and my merch store from my buddies at wehavemerch.com. There's Matt Sager Podcast t-shirts, hoodies, coffee mugs, and stickers, and more products coming soon. So stay tuned and check those out. Also, you can get me on Twitter @MattSager. On Instagram, I'm Real Matt Sager. And on Facebook, let's see. My personal page is The Matt Sager. My voiceover page is Matt Sager VO. And this podcast page is facebook.com/Matt Sager Podcast. For the rest, my voiceover reels and contact information, articles and blog posts, back episodes of this podcast, and a whole lot more, you can find all that at mattsagervoiceover.com.